G'day, today we're replacing the rear wheel bearings. So start by jacking up the vehicle, putting axle stands under the axle so it's all secure. Next, remove the wheel, then remove the brake caliper via these bolts at the rear. Then remove the brake drum. You may need to knock it with a soft hammer and use bolts in the threaded holes to help get it off. Once that's done, we're going to remove the axle. Do that, loosen the nuts, then use a drift or soft hammer, hit the studs to shock the collars off. Then remove the nuts, washers and collars and you'll be able to slide the axle out. You may also need to use bolts in the threaded holes to help slide it out. Next, we're going to remove the bearing lock nuts by removing the two screws and then winding off the lock nut and pulling out the washer. From there, you'll be able to slide the hub off. Once you've got the hub off, next is to knock the bearing cones out. But this only needs to be done if you are replacing the bearings. If you're just doing a bearing repack, leave the cones in. As you can see, my bearings are quite stuffed with lots of pitting, burnt marks and very worn. Same with the cones, you can see the burn marks and the wear in there, so they definitely need to be replaced. Next up is to remove the old gasket off the front of the hub. Give the hub a really good clean, getting all that old grease out. Bit of brake clean or degreaser works really well here to help give it a really good clean, get it looking like from this to this. You also want to remove the old axle seal, that's going to need to be replaced, which doesn't come in the bearing kit and you'll have to get it separately. Next step is to knock your cones in. Make sure they're down all the way. You'll be able to hear and feel when they're down the correct distance, and then just check with your finger as well. Now we're going to repack the hub with grease. Make sure to fill it up with lots of grease so that the hole in the middle section there is full of grease to be able to work itself around. Then we're going to pack the bearings up and you'll see little forms of worm looking grease come through the other side, and that's when you know enough's in that bit. From there, place your bearing in. It's time to knock the seal down. Be very careful to knock it down evenly so you don't damage the seal. I'm using the old cone to help, and just go from one side to the other side and around and all the way over. Don't hit too much on one side, because if you send it in on an angle you can damage the seal. Next step is to grease the sub-axle, which is going to make everything slide on easier. Get a good amount of grease on there for the bearings and everything that's going to be come in contact with it. Don't go too far back. Give it a little clean at the end if you've gone over where the seal's meant to sit, so that way the seal can seal correctly. Now we're going to put the hub back on. Then we want to put the front bearing in, make sure it's sitting in there all nicely. Have to move the hub around to get it seated in correctly. Then you want to put the lock washer in, that's the one with the little tab. Make sure you slide the tab with the tab in the sub-axle. Then it's time for the lock nut to go on, and you want to get that in nice and tight. So you can use a punch to help spin that around to get it up tight. Make sure you're always spinning the hub at the same time in both directions. This way the bearing's going to seat correctly and get in there nice and tight as it should to hold your wheel on. From there you want to tighten it up super tight, keep it spinning, then loosen it right off. And then get it to where you think is tight. Don't go too tight for this. Just tight enough. Put the 2 screws in to lock it all together. From there, chuck your brake drum on, and then we're going to put our wheel on and we're going to test the bearing free play. And after testing, you'll be able to make some more adjustments if necessary. For the testing procedure, you want to spin the wheel and then rock it back and forward to see if there's any bearing free play. And as you can see with mine, there was, so I'm going to need to take it up to the next hole and then retest. So you can do all that with the wheel on, and then once we've got it to where we need to be, whether you need to tighten it or loosen it, then you can remove the wheel again and we finish off. From there, once you've got it all tightened up correctly, we're going to take the wheel off, put the axle back in. So you're going to put those collars on, then the washer, then the nut. Tighten them all up, and then tighten them to the correct torque specs. All torque specs will be in description below. Brake caliper goes on next, and put that on. You may need sometimes they can be a bit tight, you might need to knock it on, or put the bolts in at the rear, tighten them up to correct torque specs. Once that's done, wheel on, remove the jack stands, lower to the ground and torque up the wheel nuts. And job complete. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.